Somebody's after me. There's somebody after me. The 24-year-old woman's panicked voice crackles over a 911 call. In another chilling call a few months later, a teenager answers the phone late at night. A strange man on the line sneers, "Are you a whore like your sister?" He knows personal details and even claims he killed her sister. These eerie calls were some of the first hints of a predator lurking on Long Island. Little did anyone know, they were the opening moves in a deadly game that would baffle investigators for over a decade. December 2010. Suffolk County Police Officer John Malia walks along Ocean Parkway with his K9, searching for a missing woman. The dog suddenly alerts in the brush. Malia peers down and discovers a burlap-wrapped skeletal corpse. In the following days, 3 more bodies are found in the thickets by the beach, all young women, all wrapped in burlap shrouds. The grisly finds send shockwaves through the community. For Long Island residents and law enforcement, one thing becomes horrifyingly clear. A serial killer may be dumping his victims on this lonely stretch of coastline. Those first 4 victims would become known as the Gilgo Beach 4. They were Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, Melissa Barthelemy, 24, Megan Waterman, 22, and Amber Costello, 27, all missing sex workers who had vanished between 2007 and 2010. Their bodies lay hidden along a half-mile stretch of swampy dunes, just steps from the ocean. Investigators racing to find answers soon realized this was just the beginning. By spring of 2011, the body count had climbed to 10 sets of human remains, 8 women, 1 man, and a toddler. Some remains were partial and had appeared years earlier elsewhere on Long Island, deepening the mystery. Were these all victims of the same killer, or was Gilgo Beach a dumping ground for several murderers? Authorities weren't sure. The only certainty was that a monster, or monsters, was on the loose. The disappearances that led to this discovery were equally perplexing. Many of the women had been contacted by a client through online escort ads. Shannon Gilbert, whose May 2010 disappearance sparked the search, had made a frenzied 911 call the night she went missing from nearby Oak Beach. "Somebody's after me," she cried to the dispatcher before vanishing into the darkness. It was Shannon's unsolved disappearance that inadvertently exposed the larger nightmare on Gilgo Beach. Tragically, Shannon's body was found in December 2011, about 3 miles from the others. To this day, it's debated if her death was an unrelated accident or another victim of the killer. Another unanswered question that haunts this case. As police scrambled in late 2010 to identify the 4 burlap-wrapped victims, the families of missing women feared the worst. For one family, those fears were amplified by taunting phone calls from an unknown man. Melissa Barthelemy's 15-year-old sister Amanda started receiving disturbing calls shortly after Melissa vanished in July 2009. The caller used Melissa's own cell phone and spoke with a cruel, mocking tone. He knew Amanda's name and what she looked like, as she later recounted. In one call, he horrifyingly admitted, "I killed and raped your sister," and jeered at her, calling her a whore like Melissa. These calls, made from crowded locations near New York's Penn Station and Port Authority bus terminal, sent chills through the Barthelemy family. Police traced the signals to Midtown Manhattan, but amid the sea of people, the sadistic caller remained anonymous and elusive. He wasn't done. Investigators later learned the killer even checked victims' voicemails after he abducted them, an eerie sign that he was following their digital trails. Another victim's friend received a call falsely claiming she was alive in a Queens brothel, possibly an attempt by the killer to throw off police. This unknown caller seemed to relish the game, tormenting loved ones and keeping one step ahead of authorities. The public now knew a serial killer was likely at work on Long Island, and he was bold enough to insert himself into the investigation. Despite this, for years his identity remained a terrifying question mark. What kind of person could commit such atrocities and then call a victim's family to gloat? As you watch, share your theories in the comments. Do you think the killer had an accomplice? Or was he a lone wolf hiding in plain sight? The Gilgo Beach case had everyone speculating, and your thoughts could shed light on this mystery as well. By early 2011, a multi-agency task force was formed to hunt the suspected Long Island serial killer. The FBI joined Suffolk County Police and the media swarmed. Tips poured in, leads were chased, yet progress was painfully slow. Years passed without an arrest, leaving the victims' families anguished and the community on edge. In hindsight, it became clear the investigation suffered critical missteps that let the killer slip through the cracks. One major lead had emerged back in 2010, but it wasn't fully pursued. A key witness, a roommate of Amber Costello, had reported seeing a tall, burlap-carrying stranger driving a dark first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche pickup on the night Amber disappeared. He even gave police a detailed description of the man-tall, heavy-set dark hair. This was crucial information that should have narrowed the suspect list dramatically. Shockingly, this tip was lost or ignored in the shuffle. It went uninvestigated over the years, according to Suffolk County's current DA, Ray Tierney. A former Suffolk police detective later lambasted the handling of the case, calling the failures serious blunders. "I gave them the exact description of the truck and the dude. Why didn't they use that?" the frustrated witness recalled asking. It's a question that would haunt investigators. If they had acted on this lead sooner, could the killer have been caught years earlier? At the same time, internal turmoil within law enforcement hindered the case. In a disturbing twist, the very people leading the investigation were embroiled in scandal. Suffolk County's police chief at the time, James Burke, had a reputation for keeping the FBI at arm's length. In fact, Burke refused FBI assistance and tightly controlled the case information. This decision, allegedly driven by his own corrupt motives, effectively hamstrung outside efforts that might have helped catch the killer. Burke himself later landed in prison for obstruction of justice and other crimes, part of a corruption scandal that also took down the county's district attorney. This case was bungled and polluted from the beginning, said an attorney for several victims' families. Such dysfunction at the top undoubtedly slowed the investigation to a crawl. For more than a decade, the Gilgo Beach killer remained a ghost. He seemed to vanish, just as quickly as he had appeared, but unbeknownst to everyone, investigators already had pieces of the puzzle. They just hadn't put them together yet. And the killer himself was quietly living an ordinary life, watching everything from the shadows. Fast forward to early 2022. With new leadership in Suffolk County, a reinvigorated task force takes a fresh look at the evidence. In just 6 weeks, they uncover that long-buried tip about the Chevy Avalanche and the tall suspect. This time, they act on it. Investigators run a search for all first-generation Avalanches registered to local owners. Almost immediately, they hit a match. A man in Massapequa Park owned the same model truck, and he lived right in the area profilers believed the killer might reside. Astoundingly, this man also worked in Midtown Manhattan, the very place the taunting phone calls had originated years before, and when they saw his physical stats, their hearts likely skipped a beat. He was 6 foot 4 inches tall and about 240 pounds, just as the witness had described. The dormant clue had come alive, pointing straight at a suspect who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Investigators began quietly digging into this man's background. His name was Rex Heuermann, a 59-year-old architect with an office on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Outwardly, he seemed like an ordinary suburban husband and father. He had no obvious criminal record and lived in a modest ramshackle house in a quiet Long Island neighborhood. Could this really be the same individual responsible for such heinous crimes? Detectives kept their suspicions secret and started tailing him, gathering whatever evidence they could without tipping him off. Authorities soon discovered that the suspect's cell phone activity raised huge red flags. Years earlier, investigators had compiled a pattern of cell phone usage tied to the murders. The killer had used burner phones to contact the victims and arrange meetings. After the women went missing, those same phones often traveled to Midtown Manhattan, where the mysterious calls to family were made, and then back out to Long Island near Massapequa Park. Now guess who lived in Massapequa Park and worked near Midtown? Rex Heuermann. In fact, Suffolk DA Tierney noted that not once could they find an instance of those crucial phones being used when Heuermann wasn't in the same area. It was as if his daily movements cast a dark shadow that perfectly matched the killer's footprint. Investigators also turned to forensic evidence. Back in 2010, crime scene techs had collected a few stray hairs from the burlap wrappings on the victims. Most of these hairs didn't yield full DNA profiles at the time. But technology had advanced. Under the radar, detectives obtained a sample of Heuermann's DNA by following him and snagging a discarded pizza box from his trash. In early 2023, they tested leftover pizza crust for DNA. The results were the kind that make detectives' hairs stand on end. The DNA matched mitochondrial DNA from a male hair found on one of the Gilgo Beach victims, Megan Waterman. Statistically, that hair could belong to only a very tiny fraction of people, and one of them was now the man under surveillance. Additionally, other hairs from the crime scenes were linked to Heuermann's family. One hair on victim Megan Waterman's body was traced to his wife's DNA, perhaps transferred from his clothing. The forensic net was tightening. Investigators uncovered even more damning evidence as they delved into Heuermann's life. They found he had set up fake email accounts using the alias Thomas Hawk to obsessively search for information about the case and even look up photos of the victims' families. He had scoured the internet with queries like "Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught?", virtually stalking the investigation into his own crimes. Disturbingly, he also trawled the web for sadistic torture pornography and child porn, revealing a warped and violent sexual obsession. The more investigators learned, the more Heuermann looked like the real-life monster who had haunted Long Island for years. By July 2023, authorities knew they had to act. They had a suspect who appeared to be the Long Island serial killer, and they weren't going to let him slip away. But there was a complication. Rex Heuermann was a gun enthusiast with a massive arsenal. In fact, he had 92 firearm permits and over 200 guns locked in a vault at home. Fearing a standoff or destruction of evidence, the task force decided to arrest him away from his house for safety. On the evening of July 13, 2023, as commuters bustled through Midtown Manhattan, an arrest team moved in near Heuermann's office. They caught him off guard on a Manhattan street. The very environment that he had once used for anonymous phone calls now became the scene of his capture. Heuermann was reportedly stunned. According to his attorney, he looked completely shocked and insisted he had no idea why he was being arrested. But the facade of innocence was about to crumble. After 13 long years, the mystery of the Gilgo Beach killer finally had a face and a name. Neighbors watched as police swarmed Rex Heuermann's home in Massapequa Park following his arrest. Within hours of the takedown, a swarm of law enforcement descended on the Heuermann family's ramshackle house on First Avenue. This unassuming residence, with its sagging porch and overgrown yard, was now a massive crime scene. Investigators in hazmat suits combed through every inch, hauling out boxes of evidence, a creepy portrait of a battered woman, and even large coolers that made onlookers shudder. Could these hold gruesome secrets? Speculation ran wild. It turned out Heuermann's wife and 2 children had been out of town on the dates of the known murders, giving him the opportunity to act on his gruesome impulses undisturbed. The double life of this seemingly ordinary man was beginning to unravel. As details emerged, the public learned that the suspected killer was no drifter or deviant loner, but a successful architect who worked in NYC and lived in a middle-class suburb. He had been hiding in plain sight, a chilling reminder that serial killers can be ordinary on the surface. Neighbors described him as a quiet, odd loner. One neighbor recalled feeling uncomfortable passing his house, saying it gave her a very strange feeling. Now they knew why. The arrest of Rex Heuermann answered the who, but so many other questions remained. In the wake of the arrest, prosecutors charged Heuermann with 3 counts of first-degree murder and related charges for the deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the prime suspect in Maureen Brainerd Barnes's murder, though that charge has not yet been filed. In court, Heuermann pleaded not guilty to all charges. As of now, he awaits trial behind bars, and investigators continue building the case. They're combing through mountains of evidence, phones, computers, DNA, and years of disturbing Google searches to ensure this case is airtight. The sheer volume of evidence is staggering. You don't take a 13-year investigation and turn it over in a day or two, the DA remarked about the ongoing process. Meanwhile, the discovery of Heuermann has brought both relief and anguish to the victims' families. At long last, there's been a break in the case, but it also means revisiting the horror of what their loved ones endured. Authorities have hinted that Heuermann may have kept trophies from victims as souvenirs. Searches of his home and storage units are ongoing, trying to locate any personal items from the women that could further link him to the crimes. Each new revelation is as unsettling as the last, painting the picture of a man living a perverse double life, respected professional by day, alleged serial killer by night. And what about the other 6 sets of remains found near Gilgo Beach? To this day, investigators have not definitively connected Heuermann to those. Some officials suspect that multiple killers may have used the remote beach as a dumping ground. That means even with one suspect in custody, the Long Island community wonders if other murderers might still be out there. The death of Shannan Gilbert also lingers as a tragic question mark. Her official cause of death is undetermined. An independent autopsy suggested possible strangulation, but Suffolk police have at times theorized it was an accidental drowning in the marsh. Was Shannan actually another victim of the Gilgo Beach killer, or a victim of chance? We may never know for sure. Unanswered questions like these keep this case in the public eye and prove how many dark secrets the Gilgo Beach sands may still hold. The Gilgo Beach serial killer case is a story of horror, heartbreak, and ultimately, hard-won hope. It's a case that exposed grave failures in the investigative process, but also demonstrated the power of persistence and new thinking. For over a decade, a killer walked free, taunting victims' families and evading justice. Now, thanks to a renewed investigation and one overlooked clue that finally got its due, an alleged killer has been unmasked and a community can begin to heal. Yet, even as we await Rex Heuermann's trial, the mystery isn't completely put to rest. Will investigators tie him to more victims? What other secrets might be uncovered from his home and computer? And how did a seemingly normal family man hide such depravity for so long? The world will be watching as this case unfolds in court, eager for answers and justice. Let's keep this discussion going. What do you think about the Gilgo Beach case and the arrest of Rex Heuermann? Are there lessons in the investigative missteps, or signs we all might have missed? Leave a comment with your thoughts, theories, or any details you find most shocking. This case captivated true crime followers for years, and we're eager to hear your perspective. Stay tuned for our next video, and until then, stay safe and stay curious. The truth, as this case proves, is often more chilling than fiction.